All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us here. We are the board of directors for the Okanagan Psychedelic Society. I'm going to take a second to acknowledge the land that we all sit on here, that we work, live, and play on. We're all grateful, uninvited guests on the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territories of the Syilx people. The Syilx people are the original and ancient stewards of this land and water. The term ancestral recognizes that land stewardship is handed down from generation to generation from time immemorable, and traditional recognizes the ancestral and present connection and relationships of the people to the land. The term unceded recognizes the title and stewardship to these lands were never surrendered or turned over to any other person or entity, including the Crown, through a treaty or agreement. And stewardship speaks to the careful and responsible management of something entrusted to one's care long term. And this is different than what we as Canada see as colonial ownership. I also want to recognize the Métis Nation and their contribution to the ways of being and knowing here on Turtle Island and what we call Canada. I also want to recognize and acknowledge that today is May 5th, and it's a day of remembrance for the missing and murdered Indigenous women, men, boys, girls, and two-spirited people. I also, lastly, but not least, need to mention that we are in an epidemic of the opioid poisoning crisis still, where people are unnecessarily dying due to poisoned, unregulated drug supplies, stigma, criminalization of the drugs and the people who use them, and unsensible drug policy. We're gonna have a round of introductions so you can get to know us a little bit and then talk about some stuff we like to talk about.
Powerful message, Melissa. Thank you. Quinn, you're top left. Did you want to start?
Sure. So my name's Quinn. I go by the pronouns he, him, and his. As Melissa was saying, I currently am living in Kelowna, BC, which is the unceded territory of the Syilx peoples. I guess a little bit about myself. My background, my focus, I kind of come from the cannabis community. So I spent 7 years in the cannabis community, both on the illicit and then the legalized sides of cannabis work, and had the privilege and honor of working with a lot of people with cannabis medicine and helping a lot of people work through a lot of their physical and mental illnesses, and really enjoyed that beautiful work. And that led me into learning and experiencing psychedelic medicines and the boundlessness that they teach you, and the seemingly limitlessness that they can offer us in terms of healing. I'm finding, like, both individually and as community. Professionally, I've moved from psychology background into social work, and that's where I currently live professionally, and with a lot of the work that I do is in that realm. And it all, for me, it all kind of like intersects into with psychedelics. And I think from myself, when coming into this conversation, I really felt that there was a dialogue here in the Okanagan of a lot of people that wanted to know more about psychedelics, or were using psychedelics but didn't know, like, I guess proper use, or maybe not proper isn't the right word, but careful use, mindful use. And I just saw this amazing need here. And since then, I've met so many awesome people, like everybody here on the board, and we've kind of come together to see if we can shape out some of that dialogue here in the Okanagan.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Great opening. Yeah, looking forward to hearing more about it. Next, we'll go to Rebekah. Rebekah, what I really enjoyed about you when you joined the board, so when we originally formed the board, Rebekah wasn't present, and then she joined us afterward, kind of like at an interesting time. She was able to bring a lot of her background and skill and expertise to a specific task that we needed to do, which was kind of figure out who we are as a society. So without taking too much time, Rebekah, take it away. Let us know who you are, what you're about.
Okay, thank you. So my name's Rebekah, and I've been a nature worshiper since being a child. I come from farmers and from the countryside. Lots of strong connection to animals and also to plant spirits. I have a strong connection with cannabis. I was addicted to cannabis and using cannabis as a hiding place and also as a strong medicine for many years, over 10 years. And I know not everyone finds cannabis to be something that is addictive, but for me, it was something that not only helped me, but also taught me about the edges and the cliffs of mental health. I've used a lot of different psychedelics in my healing journey, and I've worked primarily with women and girls in counseling, in dance, ecstatic dance, but also modern dance. I love expressions of all kinds, art therapy, talk therapy, as well as body work, Ayurvedic medicine, and just generally into meditation and mindfulness. So all of these things pair very, very well with the psychedelic world, primarily in terms of its healing and different types of qualities for accessing the psyche. That's what I'll say for now. Thanks so much.
Thank you. On next, we'll move on to Emma, who, yeah, since this beginning has been around. So take it away. The floor is yours.
Thanks. So my name is Emma Twaddell. I work right now. I've been doing communications, sort of social media work with the Okanagan Psychedelic Society for about a year. I got to know just sort of through the small world that the Okanagan is, the other folks on the board here, and I'm so glad that we began this little journey like 2 years ago or more. It's kind of lost track of time with COVID reality.
April 2019.
Thank you. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So
It's been 2 years already?
oh yeah. I go by she, her, they, hers. I was born in Matsqui, the crossing over place, which is the Stolo territory, the Lower Mainland. My parents are settlers. They immigrated from Britain right before having my brothers and I. I'm an auntie, and I am a social worker. I came to the work through, I guess, like always being called on to help and support people. It wasn't what I had in mind. I didn't see myself doing this 15 years ago, but I was lost in substance use. I was essentially homeless as a teenager. Just, traveling a lot and rootless, and eventually fell into addiction in my 20s. And it was a really tough road out. I had trouble accessing treatment. I was pissed off about that. It took a long time to sort of bring myself back. And as soon as I did, I was just sort of curious about brains, what got me there, why it was so hard. I went straight to school on the urging of a couple of my friends who saw me reading journal articles in my spare time. And I just completed a master's in social work and Indigenous trauma and resiliency. And I've been a substance use counselor for the past, 7 years. I really wanted to use my experience to support people. And what brought me to psychedelics was pretty early on, when I was sort of, turfed out into the world at about 14. Found mushrooms. We skipped school, went picking with my friends, and we got some through friends. And it was the first time I felt really, really like universally connected and held by something so much bigger. And I'd been taken to church by all kinds of foster families. I've gone to like 7 churches, but I'd never felt so connected in such a way. And I was so interested from then on. I didn't so much use psychedelics recreationally, more like a occasional reset. But don't get me wrong, I enjoy psychedelics as well. So I'm really got into the therapeutic aspect. While in my journey through school, I found this forum where they were doing psychedelic therapy, and I just dove in. I found it so fascinating that it was being used in a structured way, because I'd only ever sort of done it with friends or, by myself or, in random occasions. So to see it being done therapeutically with a structure and such amazing results, I was really interested. So that really got me started and talking about it and having really interesting conversations and attending, what few groups were going on over the years. And then it also got me connected with all these guys. So really stoked to be here, and I'm excited for our conversation tonight.
Great introduction as usual. I'm also with the recent developments of kind of like the phase 3 MAPS trial for MDMA coming out recently. It's exciting to kind of see it get more and more traction. So on to the next person, Melissa, the person who originally connected me to this organization, kind of like the glue that holds it all together. Take it away.
Oh, God.
No pressure.
Oh, geez, I gotta take off my coat for that one. My house coat. Okay. Woo. Holding it all together, eh? I don't know if that's very true. Firstly, I do want to acknowledge, though, that that's really nice of you to say, Mart. But I think that we all hold it all together, because I think everyone that I'm talking to right now and like in this group holds me together too. So I don't know. I'm super grateful to be part of this. Why am I here? Who am I? So I'm Melissa. Hi. I live, like I said, on traditional Syilx territory now in the Okanagan in British Columbia. I originally am from Treaty 6 land, which is in northern Alberta, just north of Edmonton. And I left there quite young. Yeah, my family are settlers. My dad's I'm a first generation Canadian on my dad's side, and I'm a 6th generation Canadian on my mom's side, technically. And most of my family are from the prairies and came across horse and buggy a long, long time ago. Yeah, I grew up in a family that had a lot of trauma. I grew up with a single mom and a brother, low level of education. I don't know if anyone's heard of the social determinants of health, but I can pretty much cross off all of those things on my list of things that weren't happening. There was substance abuse happening in my family. There was sexual abuse. There was physical abuse. I'm lucky my mom kind of hid us from a lot of that outer stuff. So I feel like it gave me a chance to look at it from a different perspective that she could. So I guess a lot of why I'm here has to do with just my trauma history and trying to heal myself and some of the intergenerational trauma of my ancestors that was brought onto us and that we have brought on to others, maybe unknowingly and unconsciously, through colonization and just being part of the society. So yeah, it's been quite the journey. Yeah, I guess I don't even know where to start. Life is crazy, you know. I know everyone can relate to that. We all have our paths and our journeys. Um, but I came to the Okanagan about 15 years ago. My father lives here, and I decided to do a Bachelor of Science in Nursing after a lot of meandering through my 20s, mostly struggling with my own substance use issues as well, and struggling with the loss of my mom to cancer, and just feeling basically alone in the world. And what I really knew was that I felt like my experiences may have something to offer others, and that I could maybe transform what I was feeling into something positive. So yeah, I did my Bachelor of Science and in nursing. And while I was doing that, I started working with an organization that does drug checking at music festivals. So drug checking in primarily recreational settings at the time. And that kind of catapulted me into the world of drugs in a different way, not just from a personal use perspective. And I mean, I already kind of had an idea of what the dysfunctional kind of pieces look like from my own personal experiences in my family and friends groups growing up. But now I got to go to like 15,000 person festivals and watch everyone do drugs and then test them. And yeah, like learning about harm reduction pretty much changed my life. And it's been the anchor for basically all of the community health work that I've done since professionally. And it was also the catalyst to help me explore my own relationship with substances, as well as to start to discover the healing and therapeutic uses of psychedelics beyond recreational use and also in recreational use settings, because I don't really believe healing only happens in one place. And it hasn't for me. So I truly believe this isn't just about one thing. It's not just about the medical paths. It's not just about the recreational paths. It's not just about the ceremonial paths. It's about all of them and how they intertwine and tie together, and how we can all heal as a community through our own expression and ways and needs. And psychedelics are a tool in that belt. I don't want to go on forever. I guess I can just kind of.
I think that's a great spot.
Yeah.
Really,
Okay.
I think with what was said kind of everywhere, there's a lot that we can kind of dig in and dive into. But before that, I'll just introduce myself. So, bonjour tout le monde, je m'appelle Martin. My name is Martin. Pronouns are he, him. I live in Kelowna. I joined the board because, well, for a lot of reasons. We're kind of transitioning, specifically when it comes to psychedelics, we're kind of transitioning from prohibition to either decriminalization or legalization, specifically kind of like following what's going with, well, what's happened with cannabis. And I wanted to be a part of the development of that to kind of help that transition. And the best way that I thought I could do so was to do it kind of like at a community kind of grassroots level. And so when I connected with Melissa at the farmers market, so I own a business. I make tempeh, so high protein plant-based foods. And I think when I met Melissa, we stayed an hour and a half just kind of like chatting away. She had her like a thing with a cat with like funky sunglasses on or something like that. And I knew she was my kind of person. But yeah, so we connected, and then with the society, I was a part of, well, just kind of like in the background in the day of kind of organizing one of our first events, which was the movie Dosed. And so, yeah, I've got a lot of different ideas as to what we can do as a society. I think there's a lot of opportunity for kind of a society of people like us to kind of help kind of like transition from a prohibition model to a non-prohibition model. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see the types of conversation that come out of here. Where I kind of wanted to go, this was kind of touched on by Melissa, and then Emma kind of mentioned it in our pre-chat as well, just kind of like a general conversation around harm reduction. I think it's important just because, like I said, we're going from a place where these things aren't legal to where the legal status is going to change. And I think education is a huge component about that. And these substances, there's a lot of stigma around that. So harm reduction, what does it mean? What's the value? What's the point? What should the people know about it?
I don't know, who wants to start?
Probably you, Melissa.
Oh, geez.
You or Emma, you both had some points about it.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I can just, I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to say, like, I mean, whoever's watching too, maybe, like, generally, I guess, can just put like a little basic history on harm reduction. And I'm not going to be able to say everything because, God, you guys will never, you'll never hear the end of it. So I guess harm reduction, like the term was kind of coined as like a population health intervention. It really, really picked up during the AIDS crisis. And it was a way to kind of, it was basically a population health framework, if we can put it like that, to basically provide education in a stigmatized and like through stigmatized topics so that people could learn how to reduce harm, even though they may be involved in risky behavior. It became very apparent that our health and social systems were unable to keep up with the need for safety. So harm reduction became kind of the coined term that started to like look at safe supply, condom use, consent, you know, talking about drug use, needle exchange programs kind of were like some of the first things that kind of started to pop up. Yeah,
Support
so
groups.
What's that?
Support groups.
Yeah, support groups. And then since then, it's just kind of like continued on in a way. It's also kind of a, I see it as a way that communities can, I guess harm reduction isn't just like a, it's not just a public health thing. It's more of like a community health or like a grassroots thing too, because when harm reduction is used in different, you know, vulnerable communities, it kind of like, as soon as you start bringing education in around things that are prohibited or stigmatized, and you start talking about them openly, it starts to bring a lot of empowerment to people, and it starts to change the way communities help each other. So it's more than just like a health initiative by professionals. It is definitely a grassroots movement to empower people to take control of their health through education and safety, I guess. Anyone want to add to that?
I'd love to from there. That the education piece I find so critical because of how propaganda and stigmatization has been spread in our media, through our government, through all of these historical ways of, you know, banning this or prohibiting that, and for the reasons of it wasn't about really public health or safety that drugs were prohibited and banned. There's been so much propaganda that when I talk about psychedelics with, you know, people, the first thing they say is like, but that's a terrible thing, and aren't you worried about people dying from MDMA therapy? And it's just, there's the propaganda that's been spread, the things that people have heard in the media or in the news has caused such widespread sort of
Panic.
perceptions and panic and misperceptions of what these substances are and what they do. And I think the education around the stigma, which keeps people, substance users in the closet and hidden and keeping them from getting help, undoing this propaganda is such a huge part of what needs to happen. And a huge part of why, you know, even with psychedelics, we need to be here and talking about it and just starting the conversations. And like you said, airing out these stuffy stigmas so that the conversation gets started and correct and accurate information can be spread and shared.
Yeah, it's so hard to spread accurate information sometimes when everything is criminalized as well, because through criminalization and penalization of substances and the people who use them, we're not like even able to, you know, access information fully for stuff like this. And that's what makes it dangerous. The drugs aren't inherently dangerous, and the people who are using them aren't inherently trying to cause themselves harm. And if we look at even, the stats, like, that's not what's causing the harm.
I want to jump in on the education piece and just say, you know, parents and their children, we've got children starting drug use in grade 4, some of them even younger. So if the parents aren't interested in the information in terms of protection, you know, education is something that allows people to know what is a safe way of using something and what's not a safe way. And so many kids find this stuff out from their peers. And those their peers don't necessarily really know, or they only know what they've heard. And oftentimes, you know, it is twisted. And especially if something is just no, it's a no. Well, where do you think the first place so many people will go to get their own truth is if we don't supply them with even, you know, the basics, they're going to want to figure that out for themselves. We're inherently curious creatures.
I think part of that problem is that, like, there's the fear that information will lead to use. And then that fear is still surrounding that stigma that use is bad. And that kind of is in the inherent problem and the value of educating and informed use.
I think that we need to like pull the wool away from our eyes and realize that people are using drugs. And that's not just us, but society in general, just to kind of, it's just like alcohol prohibition. I mean, I know we've talked about this before, like, when they prohibited alcohol, were people not using alcohol? No, they were still using it. They were using it underground all of a sudden. It wasn't as safe. They were transporting it in smaller packages that was stronger and unregulated. And what happened? People died. And the same thing is happening in the opioid crisis right now. And with other recreational substances that are being poisoned and, or, you know, maybe they have their cut with different things, or, you know, maybe they're not being tested. Like and a lot of kids, like, there's just, the stigma around it. I mean, even just the people dying in their own homes, just regular people who are afraid to talk about it. No one knows they're using, and they're using alone, and they're dying. And that's unnecessary. And kids too, kids who can't talk to their parents. It's scary. And I mean, I don't blame the parents in some ways, though. That's a scary topic for them too. And when they don't have any education, like you said, Rebekah, about substance use in general and the actual risks and how to mitigate some of those things, it leads to conversations that are basically like, drugs are bad, don't use drugs. That's the end of story. I just heard someone say that to their kid, like someone
comes back to
this
Nancy
weekend.
slogan.
I
And
know
it's
for
also
me, sorry, go for it, Emma.
criminality. I think the criminalization of the substances that lead parents to really be fearful of admitting to any use at all, even if it's a recreation joined on the Fridays after the kids are put to bed and they're done their responsibilities, or, you know, whatever substance they might choose to partake in, they can't talk about it because of the criminalization, and their kids can get taken away. And this is reality for parents. I mean, I've worked with mothers and fathers who've had their children removed from the home because, you know, they found a joint. And I know that the agency does a lot of important work, but because of the criminalization of substances, some of these occasions are unnecessary because it's illegal. And for parents to sort of help their children learn or help them find a safe supply if they really want to try something, it's illegal. And so how do we move into a space where we can support our children and teach our children as parents when it's not allowed? And how do we talk about this in agencies as professionals when it is illegal and supporting use is illegal? And I think conversations, they're absolutely crucial to keep people alive and safe and actually like enjoying their life, and also just trying and not falling in, and making sure that people are supported in so many other ways, because as we all have learned, trauma is such a root cause. These, what are those again? Somebody here? Childhood experience. So
Oh, ACEs, the adverse childhood experiences.
Yeah.
Adverse childhood experiences that create the perfect conditions for someone to have a void to fill, whether that's with shopping, sex, gambling, drugs, alcohol. We're often set,
Addiction.
turned out into the world just wired for this feeling of need that substances fill, and they even community of around using the substance. There might be, I know I made a lot of friends when I started using mushrooms, or when I started smoking weed. There was, oh, now I can hang out with these folks, or there's a whole community waiting there. And that's wonderful, because community and connection is really what I was after. It wasn't that the substance. And that is children need. So if we can't talk to children about what's going on, they want to try something. Well, like for what? What's missing? Or, you know, it's great to explore. Kids are going to explore whether it's illegal, allowed, supported, or not. It's a totally normal part of development, as we know. But adverse childhood experiences set people up for this need to fill, and like we know, all kinds of substances and activities can fill that. And so services around this discussion, you know what I mean? Like being able to talk about stuff and then have services on hand and knowing what's going on in people's lives without having, can't talk about it at all.
Yeah, wouldn't it be a cool world when people could, like, I mean, I always just think of the spectrum of use, like the beneficial versus, I mean, all the way at the end, the problematic, right? And there's so many things in between. Wouldn't it be amazing if, I mean, what if someone was having beneficial experiences and feeling that sense of community and belonging, and, you know, and maybe they were using LSD and that brought them together, and that was a beneficial experience that potentially is beneficial for the rest of your life. Like, and where science is actually showing that.
Yes.
These experiences are some of the most profound experiences that someone will have in their entire life. And to be able to, you know, even have that, and then be able to go, hey, wait a minute, maybe, oh, I'm doing this now, but maybe this is problematic, and be able to recognize it within ourselves because we have enough information to see it, and then be able to talk about it as well.
Without
and
fear
or never have I mean, yeah, some people may never have but one experience in their life, and some may recreational use forever.
Statistically, most of the people who do try substance use or explore it even for a time do not. It's a small percentage of folks who do. And so not being allowed to talk about it, you know, feeling criminalized for.
I just want to jump in quickly and say how not only is there a community base that's there waiting for us if we do try a substance, which, you know, that community might be positive or negative for us depending, but there are traditions, there are ancestral ways that these plants and various substances have been used to improve community bonding, improve bonding between parent and child, have those initiatory experiences from childhood into adulthood, these kind of pivotal moments in our lives. They're defined in other traditions that use these plants, they're very clearly defined. They actually get acknowledged by the entire community, by the family. It supports a foundation for families to connect. You know, like a lot of families don't connect unless there's a funeral.
Right.
And everybody's so worried about going and seeing their family and all the awkward feelings. Well, there are ways to rejuvenate those connections in a way that it doesn't need to be so awkward for us. We can let our emotions and our expressions come out. And I just want to say lastly that communication is shaped by the experiences that we have. Emma, you said perceptual experience. Like our ability to evolve in our communication and our emotional intelligence levels, our evolution, is sometimes based upon those deeper experiences that that you can't have without some of these substances. Or that, I mean, you could maybe through meditation, but that this is another channel that could be open for those potentials.
It's another pathway.
Yeah, and I mean,
of accessing like an inner self, like a touching in with yourself and with your community.
I'd be curious to kind of, and I mean, by respecting like personal boundaries, because I know these experiences can be like quite deep and personal, but I'd be really curious because like everyone here has like stepped up to invest like their time and energy into joining a board specific for like our community as it relates to psychedelic. I'm curious to know like what has working with these substances, what has it done for you? I guess I can kind of start off as a bit of a starting point. So the way I describe it, so in 2014, I went to Peru and I participated in ayahuasca ceremonies. And the way I describe it is what it did to me is it planted seeds that like still to this day are developing. And this is like 7 years or 6.5 years later. So at the time, if I was like a ship leaving from Europe, the ship really just veered off a few degrees, which isn't a big deal when you're leaving port. But over time, those experiences, that degree shift is the difference between landing in Quebec and landing in Mexico. And so, like for me personally speaking, I've always been curious with like kind of the larger questions in life. And so that first showed up as like kind of questioning Catholicism, which is kind of like the background I grew up in, and then kind of rejecting that, looking into science. So like anything Stephen Hawking, I obsessed over, and then looking into, I kind of stumbled into what plants and psychedelic and more of the traditional aspects, uses. So that's how I got connected to go and try ayahuasca. And it really like, I work a corporate job back in Ottawa, and now I like make high protein plant-based foods and I'm growing my beard. So the change has been quite drastic. Like what I value has completely changed. Yeah, like the big lessons, I was in preparation for this meeting, I was kind of looking over some of, well, actually the last time I participated in ceremony, I wrote a little bit of a poem, and one of the aspects is like, or one of the sayings that came out of those ceremonies is, well, I'll bring it up so I don't mess it up. Stay connected to source and do your work. So that's essentially like how I try to live my life is I stay connected to source, God, the universe, and I just do my work every day. And I find that for me personally, if I'm connected to source while I do things, the things that I do become an act of service, an act of love for source. And so my life has kind of changed from this rat race of grinding away to everything becomes an act of service, an act of love. And yeah, I mean, there's still a lot of work to do. I'm constantly reminded to be in the moment, to stay in the moment, constantly reminded to surrender, because even though my ego would want to think that I can control things, I truly don't. But yeah, that's a big reason of me being who I am today can be directly traced back to my experiences in psychedelic space and being able to integrate them into my life.
Mm.
That's beautiful.
Oh,
Thanks, Martin.
so much to, thank you. So much to resonate with there.
When I think about personal experiences in psychedelics, I think about how much gratitude I have for the icky, sticky, dark, scary, rabid, messed up, creepy stuff that humans sometimes have to digest. And before we digest, we have to actually see and look at and look into. And we were talking about the bison, like running into the storm or whatever earlier. And it's almost like you have to consolidate yourself in a very powerful and vulnerable way to look at the things that are the scariest in ourselves, in our families, and in our ancestors' lives too. We were talking about how did we get to the Okanagan Psychedelic Society, and I would say by coming to myself through the natural world, through connecting with nature and having nature reflect to me my true nature, and that being something that is ever changing. And I think I first used psilocybin. That was the first substance I used. I was 13 years old, and it was with my cousin, and we were outside for many hours, and at some point when we could talk again to each other, there was this very, very powerful understanding of oneness. And on a psychological ladder, isn't that the top? Isn't that, where we some of us hope to, as a goal of self-realization, connect to oneness? So that's my piece, my little piece. Thank you.
I'll never forget the first few times using psilocybin. I think I smoked cannabis early on, as I developed mad anxiety when I was like 14, and my life changed so drastically, so quickly. I lost my mom to cancer. I had nowhere to go after that. And so my brother and I were living on our own at 14 years old, getting ourselves to school and such. And I think I was smoking cannabis for a while, and that just made things manageable in a way, from what I remember. But like you were saying, Rebekah, I remember the first being anxious around people and anxious in social settings, and that connection that I felt when I finally, when sometime during that exposure, my first exposure to psilocybin, really feeling that connection and community, because that's what I was lacking. And that was the peak of it for me, and feeling a part of something bigger and a part of all the people around me. I know not everyone gets that feeling. I've talked to lots of people who just partied and had fun with it and they didn't get that, but it's really something that struck me so deeply that it gave me a reason to stick around. So it was like a heavy thing. As my use progressed through my 20s, I did develop a habit that I could not kick. And I tried everything. I have all the willpower in the world, believe me. And I eventually used the what are we supposed to refer to them as? The rooms, what do they call it? I used the AANA, whatever. Anyways, I went to these meetings and they worked. It was the first thing that I was just like, okay, if there's a structure, I can put myself in this spot and slot in right here and do the work that they suggested. I couldn't afford counseling my whole life. It was like free counseling. They have a very structured program. You do the work of it. And it kept me around people who weren't using. And at that time, I needed that so much, and it worked for me. And I dove headlong in. But after a while, it was coming up on 2 years, and it just wasn't fitting. Something wasn't fitting for me. I was trying to volunteer and trying to do all this, stuff, and something wasn't quite jiving. And it was at that time I just happened to meet some people. We went into the forest and did a good dose of psilocybin, and there it was. That feeling of connection to the greater world, to nature, and coming out of it with this desire to share that, because I was watching people fall out of this program and die, or just disappear or go back into use, full-blown use. And I knew that I didn't want to do that. I knew somewhere in me I couldn't go back to that or I might die. And I also came to an understanding somewhere along the way that even the opiates that I was using were medicinal for me, because I'd encountered so much trauma over those years that I needed to build a little fence there and deal with it over time. And it took me some time to sort of forgive and understand that that use also was okay. And I needed to do something to just take my mind off of all of the too much that I'd seen. So I came to this place of actually wanting to give back. And I found myself, you know, just kind of back in that flow of life. And, you know, the spontaneity that I'd lost trying to keep myself safe and keeping everything rigid. After a few good sessions with a few good friends out in the forest, to be honest, and learning to become spontaneous again. I was so afraid to fall out and fall apart, really. And I think that was the greatest gift for me.
Wow.
Powerful.
Yeah. Wow.
Mm.
I love hearing your guys' story, because my background is just like completely different. Like I bleed privilege and have always my entire life, and I came to substance use kind of like into my 20s as someone who's like older, almost done university. So yeah, thanks for sharing. Quinn.
Yeah, it's funny. Like I'm hearing everyone's stories, and there's so much that I resonate with. But my path is a little different too. And I like MDMA was the first drug I ever used. I drank once, but that was it. Like I had like this youth and growth that was just like, it was, I don't know, not structured, but there was like a lot of fear in my family. But it's strange enough that like there was death and substance misuse and overdose. And I think, you know, and then there was a lot of trauma and sexual assault and within my family. And I think that drove a lot of what I learned. And so I kind of came from like a fear place, and I saw what alcohol did when not used in a healthy way. And I saw what, you know, like heavier drugs did. And I think that always just stuck with me as something I didn't want. So like I said, I drank once when I was in high school, and I felt so rebellious and badass. And like, so yeah, I was the coolest kid that night, you know? But then honestly, I was like, I want to try MDMA. And so I went into it. I bought Dr. Julia Holland's book, was it Ecstasy, the Complete Guide? And like, I must have been 17 or 18 when I got into this. And I was there was this cool club, and it doesn't exist anymore, in Grand Prairie, Alberta. And I was at the attic, and it was the coolest freaking, there was black lights everywhere and just wicked music and such awesome community. That was the standout point for me. And me taking those drugs, it was really like, it was about the experience, but it was so much about like the community and connecting with people that, I don't know, just had a shared thing. And I didn't try cannabis until I was in my like early 20s. And so it was like, I think in that way, I'm a little bit backwards from a lot of people. You know, and then you go through your years where you're just drinking because you experiment. At least I felt like I was. And yeah, I don't know, but like I can really resonate with what Emma was saying with like, I can't go there. There was just certain things that I didn't want to go deep into substance use because I was scared. And I think it's when I first started using psilocybin, that changed for me. It changed my perspective. It really changed how I view the world, how I viewed myself, and made me question why I was scared, what I was scared of, and that things didn't need to be so scary. But it was good that I was doing things kind of in a mindful way. Maybe not responsible always, but mindful, you know, like I was like some of my psilocybin experiences, both solo journeys and with people, it was really about always connection. And it was always about, taught me a lot about myself and taught me a lot about like being in the moment, and that I'm not alone having these experiences. I'm not alone thinking these things. And that really opened my mind up to that. There's a lot of people that our stories are all different, but I think in a lot of ways we share that want for connection, and I see psychedelics as a vehicle for that. And then that's how they've kind of been in my life. And that's the way that I've come into this society as well, is want for community, want for connection, and recognizing that need is there. Yeah. I'm a huge believer in decriminalization, in legalization if done properly, and that we don't need to be scared of drug use, but we just need to be like aware and informed, and have supports, and have open dialogue. Yeah.
I find this conversation especially interesting within the context of like our culture and society, which doesn't really have like any drug rites of passages or drug use or any kind of culture around that.
Except for alcohol.
Yeah. Well, what's the
That
saying?
one's
Like
allowed.
caffeine to work, cigarette for the break, and then alcohol to forget about it on the weekend.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just with the effect that like what psychedelics can do. Yeah, kind of interested to see like as a culture, like how does that change us? How does that, like, how do we shift as people? Because if we change internally, that's how like the whole kind of changes. So yeah, just what are kind of the effects? And I'm really curious to hear Melissa's take on her journey. And
Yeah.
I think honestly what you just said too, the the caffeine, the cigarette, and the alcohol, I'm like, it's so interesting what drugs our society has chosen to make legal, and the harm, the fact that, I mean, well, especially alcohol and cigarettes cause more harm than like pretty much every other drug even combined.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if anyone's seen those stats or that chart. I'm sure you guys all have, but
You're pretty right on.
it's just fascinating. And yeah, like we don't really have any kind of rites of passage around substances. We've just, I mean, if any of our European, you know, if we're all kind of European descent, and if there was anything, I mean, and there was, I mean, it was all obliterated by different kinds of colonialism as well, long ago. So it's almost like we're trying to reclaim, it's like a piece of our cellular knowledge, like knowledge that's so deep within us that we feel, but we also come from a place where we live in a culture where we take. So I find there's going to be, I don't know how easy it's going to be to find a balance between those things, and to not take what isn't ours for ours, while also reclaiming our own inherent humanness to this planet, and our relationship with it, and with, I mean, with plants, animals, with ourselves, with each other. I don't know. There's a lot of brokenness to mend, right? Yeah.
I think it's like, I was reading an article, like not every psychedelic is kind of like sustainable at the pace that it's kind of being used as well. Like something like mushrooms, like getting mushroom spores is fairly easy, and then to kind of like
Propagate.
to grow it and then to have the mushrooms, like it's quite sustainable. But when you're looking at like traditional uses, whether it's ayahuasca or I forget,
Washuma.
ibogaine, the
Yoga.
African root, which can take
Yeah.
like 5 years to grow. And then there's even ethical questions around the DMT that comes from the frog.
Peyote as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
It's all
That's
really
like
interesting
so-
conversations, because there's a lot of people, and I understand the interest of kind of like wanting to fill your psychedelic passport and try all of these different experiences, but
It's very consumerist of us, though, too.
it
isn't
is.
It?
We're bringing our Western capitalist culture to psychedelic space, because when you look at the traditional uses, most cultures would have like one or maybe two kind of plants that they would really work with, but we're now in a world where we have access to like pretty much anything that we want.
That's a really good point. I think it's really important to really listen, because for personally, I have never felt called to use ayahuasca, San Pedro, or peyote, not really. What I came to, I was lucky to just sort of find myself among. But I think it's really important to listen to that part of ourselves that says, you know, why or when. I did some DMT one time, and I was just like, I found it just to be a beautiful thing and a momentous thing. And I actually have not wanted to do it since. It was just what I needed at just the right time. And I don't feel like I got to go back and get more of it. I probably could get some and, you know, access it, and I could try all of it. There's something in me that says, you know, especially right now, I've found such stability and wellness. I haven't felt called to use or, you know, to access any of them in some time. And I think it's really important I think part of the education, part of the knowing that we need to pass around and talk about more is, like you said, it's not about stamping the passport and saying, I did that. But although we are in that kind of world, I think it's really important to think about, you know, what are our needs and what is calling you. Some substances, if you go do them without being called, it might not be the best time to I find that it's not ready for you, or
Not your teacher, and it
That's
sends you away in whatever way it has to get you away.
Yeah, I had one of my teachers kind of tell me that, you know, we were having a deep conversation about ayahuasca, and I was really curious, and basically he said to me, it was like, you don't seek it out, it'll find you.
Yeah.
You know, and I've kind of let that guide me in terms of what spirit plants I use, and like totally resonate with what you said, Emma. I had a very profound DMT experience, and I can still like reflect and resonate with that experience. I don't need to do that again. You know, I don't feel that that urge. I'm still learning from that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That to me is like a really important part of like the messaging as to what these drugs can do, because a lot of it, or what I'm seeing is like the introduction to psychedelic for some people is more the microdosing, which is like this small pill that you take daily. But when you start dealing with not even like the huge heroic dosages, but just like larger dosages, which you kind of have to sit and listen to what it's saying, like those take a while to integrate, and like what you can get from it can last you a lifetime. Like I think the Harvard studies, when they took students who were studying to become priests, and they gave them like half of them a placebo and then half of them a psilocybin experiences. Rick Doblin, the now president of MAPS, part of his master's or doctoral thesis was to look back, do a follow-up study with them like 30 years later. And a lot of them said it was like that experience was one of the most important like moments in their life. And when we're looking at the recent psychedelic studies that are coming out, like people rank these experiences as high as the birth of their child, which like is one of the, I mean, I've never birthed a child, but it sounds to be like a peak human experience.
Mystical.
I
Yeah.
think my death is
Mysterious.
going to be my peak human experience.
Your death.
I'm not even kidding now. And I say that because of what psychedelics have helped me see and understand.
Well, like,
I don't know. It's just like, it's like a prep, all the prep
Well,
work for the most important experience of my life. And that will be like
in
when I
the,
step out.
so in the poem that I wrote after a ceremony, one of the parts that I wrote is something in the, like, we learn to die so that we can fully live. And I find for me a lot of like the psychedelic experience is like kind of letting go, and it challenges your ego because your sense of self completely dissolves, which is, I mean, it's probably the closest thing we'll have to death before death actually happens. But yeah, me
Yeah, that
personally,
deeps.
the work where it's kind of like leading me in my life, the idea of working with death is something that I find quite attractive.
Yeah, the deep surrender piece, like into the abyss, or like just allowing, I guess the deep allowing that you need to happen, like sometimes that you need to have happen during those experiences, has been like, has rippled through my life for sure.
I hear
Yeah,
the
I
word
don't,
surrender as well.
yeah,
Surrendering.
it's interesting because like man, I really, really have a deep appreciation for the ceremonial based use. Although I will still say that recreational use can be therapeutic, and I do still partake recreationally because it is that community, that piece of like connection with people that I love and playfulness that comes from it that we don't really have permission to be in our society as humans, which is like completely wrong. like why are we not playing?
Yeah.
Why are we not
Playfulness.
laughing? Why are we not being
It's self-esteem. You actually have to trust yourself to play. You actually have to trust others to play and to allow yourself to have fun and laugh. It's vulnerability, but it's like the best side of vulnerability, you know, with no fear.
Connecting with your openness.
Yeah.
I think the last thing I just want to like really throw out there too is like the death thing and how I said that. When my mom passed away, my mom died of cancer the day after my 18th birthday. And it was a very fast like thing. It was 3 months and she had passed, and she was our primary caregiver. And I don't know, I think I'd had a number of other deaths already in my life, friends in car accidents, alcohol related deaths. Just, there was a lot, suicides, like stuff like that in my friend groups, from probably 14 till my mom died. And then there on after, I think I've lost a lot of people to substance use too. So I know the other sides. But I had this deep fear of death. But it was like irrational almost, because somewhere deep inside of me, I knew that it was fine. But I just felt like I've always just felt like so many unanswered questions. And Mark, I remember you had said like, oh, I've always been one to like look at the bigger questions. I don't know if that's exactly how you said it, but like the bigger things. And I've always kind of been that way too. And I got called to ayahuasca back when I was in university. Someone came to one of my First Nation studies class who had spent a couple of months in the jungle. It was like my teacher's son, to talk about his experience, and he sung an Aikaro. And as soon as that song began, I knew it. Like I knew it inside of me. It knew me. And it just was singing to me, and it was like, come here, like, I'm waiting for you. I know. I can show you what you need to know. Like it was just this thing, and I was like, holy crap, what was that? I'd never heard of ayahuasca. I'd never like thought about plant ceremonies. Like I just kind of wasn't there. And it took almost 7 years for me to find it. And my first experience with ayahuasca, I've had a fair number, and most of them have been kind of around I guess unpacking some of my deep core wounds. I would call it unpacking, because it's not like healing doesn't happen like all at once. So it's been a lot of digging around in the darkness. But the first experience I had with ayahuasca, I got the opportunity to spend hours in conversation with the spirit of this plant, and allowed her to take me through my life all the way to my death. And what I'd felt, and what I saw and what I experienced, and I felt it was like the most profound love and warmth and completeness. And I was everything and nothing. And it was just like, it was incredible. And it was like, it was my mother too. It was just profoundly healing. And it just answered so many questions that I needed to find this level of deep peace inside, but also have the courage to open up all of the grimy, dark crap that has been impeding my healing or holding me back or you know, things that maybe aren't mine that I'm carrying, or things that are mine that I need to change. And I don't know, man, there's like, I can't be grateful enough. Like, words can't even describe how profound of like positive changes I have had in my life and in my person and in my relationships because of psychedelics.
Yeah. Healing,
Like-
healing of patterns, awareness of patterns, healing of cycles, large cycles, small cycles, daily repetitive rituals that we would do that weren't helpful. You know, they were harmful. Relationship patterns, styles of communicating, it just, everything, it kind of touches every little particle in you to a place of renewal after time. For me, I just, what was coming through as you were speaking, Melissa, I was just like embodiment and breath and life, you know, just coursing through, and like it's doing a life, a death, a birthing, a rebirthing, like it's doing it every second as we breathe. Our heart rate changes, our breath changes, our body opens, our body, you know, clenches, all these microscopic movements that will
just dance.
Yes.
This just makes me think of like integration even. What does it mean to get it into your body? What does it mean to embody? How do you shake it in?
Yes.
Let alone shake it out.
Vibrations, music, sound, song. You touched on Ikaros, the songs of the peoples that have strong relationships with that mycelial network that goes the world over and over, and the sky over and over, and the moon and the stars, all of it, right? It's all connected and it's all back to oneness.
I think that's kind of like Plur even. I don't want to bring rave culture into it too deep, but we kind of have to, like, really, I mean, peace, love, unity, respect, like MDMA, MDA, like just the culture of the people, like those people came together around music. And it's similar, like for our culture, like to think of what does Western culture have around drugs and, you know, bringing music together in a ritualistic way. Well, that is part of it. It's part of, it helped kind of progress this through Prohibition and created
the underground
not always
network.
Safety, but it did create a network. It started to create some safety. It started to create a sense of belonging.
Yeah.
And it's just growing over time.
I think of Nirvana and like the grunge, you know, alternative scene, like that for me was like one of the doorways. And then getting into the rave culture and knowing like in secret we're dirty little fun havers, you know, we're dancing and we're all together. And yes, and we feel alive, and like we're watching out, like somebody might catch us, you know. It's so, and we're just like these pure beings having all this pure love, and we're scared that someone's gonna catch us having all this play.
Or be judged.
I always think of like that moment you're on the dance floor and then you look over and you see someone you don't know and they look at you and you look at them, and then they come up to you and they dance. They're like, oh yeah, this is me. Who are you? Oh yeah. And then you're like, ooh, this is me, ha ha. And you just kind of completely connect with them in just a free way. And it's just I don't know.
Like safe.
That kind of stuff just made me so happy.
Safety.
Yeah.
Yes.
I feel like I have to grab on to something that you said, Melissa, before it disappears in the conversation. I feel it's really important. It's something like as a counselor all this time, and I mean, who hasn't looked for that magic pill? It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't immediate. And then all of what we've talked about, all of these changes that came to us, it wasn't like the next day, then everything was solved. It wasn't a resolution in a way. I mean, we've had some beautiful, wonderful experiences, all of us, about in that moment that meant so much. But like you were saying, it wasn't all at once. It wasn't overnight. Things brought us, for you, it took 7 years to get to that place. And
think of all the learning in between that to
Yeah,
get
and
there.
Mhm.
you know, that back
Let
then
alone-
when it was actually really hard to find and things like this. And as the social sort of the social media person, I get these questions like, where do I get it and how do I get better a lot? And it's really hard for me to bear because, you know, people come to us with these questions like, I need to get better now. How do I do this overnight? And I have to kind of gently respond. And this is really important for just educational reasons. There are like 10 other facets to sort of recovering ourselves. And they're the basic things like sleeping and eating and finding a place where you fit in, you know, getting in where you fit in and making a routine. And if you have medication, you got to take, you know, and all of these things.
Nutrition.
Yeah.
Where do you feel safe?
Mindfulness,
Are
yeah.
you safe?
Yeah,
Like,
safety.
Where's
For
the
me,
other chaos happening in your life that may
Yeah.
prevent you from being able to deal with some of the stuff that might come up during these experiences?
Right. I didn't have safe housing. I didn't have housing. I had to get my feet under me a little bit to be able to start to settle and feel safe enough to do any of this work and to create routine. Even it took, you know, a while. So I loved that you're like, it wasn't overnight. All of us were like, we came to these things.
You can't bypass the journey.
That's it. That bison
There's no
running
such
by.
thing. The only way out is through. That's
Yeah.
like Robert Frost said that, and that is true.
Yeah, and like we've all said in different ways about bringing light to the dark places, airing out the grimy bits, digging up. We've all kind of had these. We've made references to how
Emptying the stagnant pond.
Yeah, and sort of letting out the fear, letting go of these fears. All of these things we don't do by ourselves. We don't do them generally in solitude. Some people might, but I feel like when we have people to air it out with, people you feel safe to talk to, it's so helpful.
Emma, I love that you're bringing. Oops, sorry. Did I just interrupt you? I totally did.
Okay.
I was just thinking. I love that you're bringing this up because, and I know, like we talked a little bit about like our kind of consumer culture, but I feel like, I don't know if you guys think this too, but I really feel like our consumer culture has a part to play in that magic pills thing, in the I'm just going to microdose and everything's going to be better, or I'm just going to go do ayahuasca in Peru and everything's going to be better.
And the media sells it in these snippets where it's like,
and Western culture likes quick fixes, right? We all want something fast and easy, because who wants to go through pain and suffering or realizations or have to own their shit or
change their whole life
or
it's terrifying.
Yeah, you have to do the work.
Right.
You have to do the work.
I had to say it. Sorry, guys.
No, it's so
it was good.
I mean, that kind of bleeds
Totally true.
from that what Melissa was talking about, from like about integration and the value of that.
Mm-hmm.
And how important that is. So say you have that profound psychedelic experience. Okay, well then what? That like you don't live in that space, you know, you take from that experience, and you have to then do a lot of work to try to understand what the heck does that mean for you. And that takes time. And that takes you doing a lot of self-care work, but a lot of work. Like some people like journaling, some people like dance, some people like art therapy, some people like talk therapy. You know, the science is showing up that like the combination of talk therapy integration with psychedelic experiences, I mean, really profound effects in terms of like, I mean, well, with MAPS, you know, with of PTSD reduction, it's like so amazing, blowing out everything else, every other modality. You know, it, not to say that it'll be for everybody, but just that combination is so essential. It can't just be I'm taking that magic pill and my world is going to be better.
Well, I just want to pop in this sentence. I can't remember who said it, but we were wounded in relationship and we need to be healed in relationship. So relational woundings need to be healed in a relational container. And that's why talk therapy becomes this safe place for people to just be witnessed.
That's, I can only imagine the potential of like, talk therapy with something like MDMA and kind of
Mhm.
just in my own experiences, like the spaces and the conversations, because when I've done it, we were just hanging out at home, and like I remember just the depth of the conversation, and I can only imagine if with the current model of like you have these sessions ahead of time and then they know what's going on, and then when you're in that space kind of like being prompted with the appropriate questions and having space held for you, I don't know if I'm just overly optimistic, but I'm just really excited for the kind of impact that this can have on who we are as people.
I do
Art,
have to,
another, I just,
sorry, I do have to recognize, like, there is science behind the whys, and it's out there for people to look. And I also have to add that for Black, Indigenous, and people of color, these experiences are different, and they are affected by oppression. And there is research all about around this as well that is happening. And you know, if that resonates, it's out there too, and it is something for everyone, for you too. So.
Hey, that just makes me think of something else. Emma, you had mentioned before we started this conversation, it was the book you're reading from Carl Hart.
Yeah.
I'm curious about the harm reduction piece. I'm curious, I don't know if you guys want to jump there or not, but
I was going to jump into consent on the safety piece, so we could
oh
go
yeah, well this is the
few
thing.
different
This
directions.
oh no, I get what you're saying. Why don't we go there first then?
Uh,
I don't
I was
care.
just going to say,
I like it all.
okay, we'll jump in real
Mark
quick.
can decide.
Consent, it will, Mart was talking about, you know, sitting at home doing MDMA with a partner or with a couple close friends. And that's helpful, but it's even more helpful when you have a trained therapist supervising and having the right questions, and the preparation and the journey and the integration after that's the secret formula, right? We've learned how our minds work. We've learned how our bodies need time and space to digest and the appropriate container. And so in terms of these ceremonies, in terms of these sacred, you know, individual times with a therapist or a counselor, or any other health professional who's prepared to do that work and that training, we need a lot of awareness on consent, on spatial boundaries, on mental boundaries, on emotional boundaries, sexual boundaries, on financial boundaries. What are our, you know, where are we at with these
Physical
things?
touch.
What were you saying, Quinn?
Physical touch.
Physical touch.
All these things need to be established beforehand, really.
Yeah,
close.
100%. And also, when you're in those situations, know that the answer yes can change to a no at any time, and that no is no at any time through the ceremony, even if or session. Even if something is a yes before, it doesn't mean it's going to be a yes. Like they have to be checked in on constantly.
Yeah.
And there are going to be people who are training other people, having conversations, challenging certain, you know, people who are holding ceremony or different experiences that different people have had. People that are traumatized going into these, you know, liminal states. You don't know. Somebody might say, you touched me. And you're like, I didn't touch you. And so those types of experiences can be really touchy and really
Also, yeah.
I don't know. In the cannabis space, there's like kind of a golden rule for therapeutic use: is start low and go slow. But the base, I guess, energy behind that statement is really, it's about, I guess, being mindful of what's going on for you, So often it's about like journaling what is happening with you and trying to realize how your states change and what you're experiencing through those different states. And I know with psychedelics, it's not the same, but I think that concept of trying to, or being aware that things are changing, and that as they're changing, you know, your perception and your awareness of what your boundaries are going to change with them as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Should we talk
I
about
think.
and dosage?
Sure.
I mean, the
like right now, I'm a more of a microdoser than a macrodoser personally, and that's with psilocybin. wait, that's not what we're talking about, right? We're not talking about. Sorry. What is macrodose? What is a microdose?
For people that are curious about, you know, use, maybe they I don't know if there's going to be like a preview or a list of what's coming up and when, and maybe some people are sort of tuning in and saying like, how does this work? How could I try this if I want to? And I think if we just need to cover the setting and dosage, which are the three sort of basic, you know, coming into use. What is your mindset? What is the reason? What's going on in your head beforehand? If you are super anxious and you're just, you know, you're at sea, it might not be the best time to take a large dose of psychedelics.
Yes.
But who knows? For some reason, so for some people that can totally change their day. So
for me, I know, like before I take mushrooms, like I am always nervous. Like nervousness is just always,
I think it's natural,
a part of it. And I think it's just like a sign of respect as to like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm kind of trusting. So yeah, but definitely if it's not something, like definitely don't go in under duress, but I think a bit of nervousness for the experience is still not a terrible thing.
Reverence for the teachers.
Yes, yeah. And the setting, what kind of environment will you be in? You want to make a comfortable space. You want to make, like Rebekah refers to the container, that comfortable space where you know, maybe you want to be able to kind of be outside and be able to move in and out if possible. I know that's not everyone's, like not everyone has access to outside space all the time, but just making a comfortable environment where you feel safe, where you have, you know, space for yourself, space for others if you can.
Cold water. Every time, every
Cold
substance.
water.
Cold water.
Around.
Yes.
It's interesting talking about setting too. I mean, I've spent a lot of time in like festival settings, right? And a lot of people will use psychedelics for the first time in a festival setting, which changes the therapeutic milieu a lot. And there's a lot of variables all of a sudden that you can't control, which is also why sometimes using that beneficial kind of like having less things happening around you can be beneficial for people, and why these more therapeutic kind of models look a little safer, but I mean, people are still using in group settings and in public settings and in settings where maybe a lot of those things can't be achieved. So that's when we have to look again back at dosing and also safety and resources around you. Like, who am I with? Do I feel safe with them? Like, if I don't want to be in this crowd, is there somewhere I can go? What is the dose? Have I dosed this before? Can I, go start low and go slow is something we use a lot.
Combinations and the safety of combinations.
Drug combinations and safety profiles. Again, sleep, water. Having a safe person and knowing where the services are is huge. And knowing all of that before you open your mouth and drop something.
And I swear that safe person is so key. Every time. You're my person. Let's do this.
And what happens if your safe person isn't safe all of a sudden though? That happens a lot too. Even like your best friend meets someone, it's like, I'm out of here, you know, and then you're alone, or like, it's just kind of like, there's so many variables. So
Yeah.
I just like that you're
Keeping-
like, it's true. There's, I mean,
Thinking
and
about
no
them.
way is the wrong way, but at the same time, it's good to think
Yeah.
about all of the variables.
Just
keeping the
considering
antidote
what-
of your
yeah.
substance as well, something that can bring you down relatively fast if you need it, or to
Mhm.
bring the person who you're sitting for down if needed.
Hmm. And I
Mm.
mean, yeah, even like Emma was talking about setting. So what was the other one? Dose? Setting dose?
Dosage.
Yeah.
Those are the
Dosage.
3, right?
Even like who's sitting for you?
Yeah.
Like in a home setting, or like, do you have a sitter? Are you alone? Does someone know you're doing it?
Well, and then what's your intention going into it? Have
What's
you
your intent?
communicated that with yourself? Have you communicated that with, if you do have a sitter or somebody there with you, that have you had that conversation?
Being
you're
open to
trying- what you're
whatever
trying to get out of-
outcome.
Sorry, Emma.
Then being open to whatever any outcome that might happen, because we can go into this with all intentions.
Yeah.
And it'll take us
Oh.
where we need to go or don't want to go.
Like, hold on and
So
let
just
go.
knowing that roll the
Knowing
dice.
that you might not get
It'll
what you
take us
thought you
there.
wanted.
Yeah.
Melissa,
I
should
mean, and
we
there are
switch?
people-
Sorry, Emma. I
Go
think I have a time lag on my computer, you guys.
Mm.
So, I forget what I was going to say.
Apologies.
What so for me, when I go into like my ceremonies with the psilocybin, like music and music choice is kind of like a big part of the
Mhm.
setting in which I'm operating is. So I'm wondering, what's your train of thought? Like, what are things you enjoy and what do you look for? Because I definitely have like my own preferences. Like there's an album by East Forest that's called Music for Mushrooms. So
Yep.
he
Mhm.
wrote and composed music in that space, and it's for that space. I've also played around with the different playlists on Spotify from the Johns Hopkins University psilocybin studies.
Mm.
But I know that like drug culture has a huge archive of music, so I'm just wondering like what do you guys kind of gravitate to?
Blue Tech
Ooh.
is one for me. That's
Love
an
Blue Tech.
old school mushroom listen, but
How do you rate
always
that?
enjoyable.
He's great. Blue Tech's great.
BLUETEC.
I
Okay.
saw him in Nelson once. I was on mushrooms actually, and it was excellent. I always go straight to East Forest personally too.
Nice.
And I really like his Ram Dass album. But I like Ram Dass, and I find it very introspective. Otherwise, I do like kind of sometimes go to like a dark, like dubstep, honestly, like a darker kind of really bassy, deep, earthy, grounding. But that's just who I am. It has to be very specific though, like no chainsaw sounds or anything weird. Like dubstep can get a little weird, but just really, or actually Ataya. Does anyone know Ataya? He's from like the coast.
Yeah.
His music is perfect for psychedelics for me as well.
I tend to listen to musics from my albums from my youth, my favorite old albums. Honestly, I don't listen to a lot of dub or EDM, but I tend to go straight to those like old things that I know all to, you know. Where I go.
I'm curious what they are. Like,
I'll
what's
tell
your
you one time.
favorite?
Oh, I don't. Well, that's the thing too. You can use music to change the pace and the mood and lift. And I'm a pretty good DJ when it comes to that stuff. Like I want to feel this way or this way, and it really depends on where I'm at. I don't even have a favorite really. So it totally depends on where I'm at.
Mood. Yeah.
Quinn, how do you feel about music in those spaces?
I don't know. I like to do, well, when I can make it happen, I like to do nature walks and really connect with nature. That's in like, not like with psilocybin, that's not with like big doses. So I know what I'm doing when I'm doing that. And sometimes I'll share it with people, but sometimes I just go by myself. And with intention. So like just recently I went to I went on Spion Cop out in Lake Country and had a hike, like went to the peak of the mountain and just sat up on the top of the mountain and meditated for a while. And it was like an honoring for a friend that had passed. And it was like an annual, it was a 1 year kind of anniversary. And so it was kind of like an honoring. And so there was no music. There was just myself, psilocybin and the mountain. And, you know, like, for me, that can be profound, but then other times I've played around with like John Hopkins playlists. I've been told a number of times about East Forest, but just haven't gotten into it. And there's a friend, Theta Phoenix. She's out in Vancouver. She's just this beautiful songstress, and she just has this amazing voice, and like she's a sound healer, and so I will listen to her.
She plays the crystal bowls.
Yeah.
Yeah, with her. She's amazing. I agree.
Yeah.
Good
So
one.
I've listened to her a couple times. Yeah.
I'd like to talk about like dosages a little bit, because especially with mushrooms, I've personally pushed dosage a little bit, always in kind of like a gradual fashion. When I was first getting into mushrooms, like I listened a lot to Terence McKenna, and he'll often go off talking about like the heroic dose and what are the different qualities and aspects of that, and kind of like glorifying a little bit. Well, it's in the name, like heroic dose, like it's,
Voice.
yes, the French is coming out. Yeah, I don't know, like for me, like one of the lessons that I learned early on is like every dose has its own value. Like there's no dose is better than another. Like you can get value out of everything, and even like the heavier doses, one of the downsides is they can kind of have a pretty heavy like come down. Like usually like psilocybin works really well with me. I don't really get headaches or any of those types of side effects, but with the larger dosages they kind of start appearing, and then I don't sleep as well as I would do with a more like a smaller dosage. So yeah, like it's I there's a lot of like the more psychonautic flavor people who want to go deep, and I mean I'll be honest, I kind of identify with that side, but I just don't want to over glorify it, because it's not like a goal or something to work towards. It's just
Like the passport.
yeah, exactly. It's another version of
For the big ego.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind
And
of defeats the purpose.
yeah, exactly.
That is like such an extremely good point. I love that. What did you say? No dose is, all doses are a good dose?
Yeah, there's stuff you can learn at every dose. So like kind of Terence McKenna's point is with the heroic dose is the reason so his opinion is you want to take a large dose, because with the large doses, it's so strong, there's no point in fighting. It's just going to take you where it goes, and there's no wrestling because you can't do anything.
It's a forced surrender.
Yeah, it's a forced surrender. You don't have to work that muscle. Which there's some gifts in going deep that you don't get from the other dosages, but the beauty in the smaller dosages is the resistance that you face. It then becomes a choice to be able to go with it, because you have the capacity to say no. And so for you to go in deeper with the smaller dosages, it's an active work of surrender. And yeah, for me,
I love it.
Yeah, for me, the psilocybin experience has always been, I call it flexing my surrender muscle. So like getting my reflex of surrendering to be stronger and stronger through repetition, and then I can reap the benefits of it in my everyday life. But yeah, that's, a lot of people kind of glorify those stronger dosages, but then you don't get the reps in when it comes to the surrender, because you don't have to work on surrender because you don't have a choice, because there's a fucking wave coming and you're just going to drown. So like, There's no
Yeah.
fighting because there's no chance of you having time to go up to breathe. You're going in the,
Oh,
and so
Going
it's,
under.
that just reminded me of something terrible. Like just an experience that was like, I wanted
Yeah.
to die. I was like, oh my God, I can't do this at all, but I have no choice. But it was with ayahuasca, and it was like not the same. Like I obviously I was like all in. I took the medicine and we were waiting for it to kick in. But I was so, because it's dark, it's like it was a night, it's like a night ceremony, and
Mhm.
I fell asleep. Like I fell asleep waiting. And then I woke up because the maestro started singing, and and literally I was being like blasted off to space, but I woke up out of a dead sleep while it was happening in my body. Like I was like, it was so scary. I was like I had no time to warm up to it or prepare or anything. It just was like, this is what you're getting. And I was like, no, please, no. I don't know anything. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I was just, that's, oh, it's crazy. And then it just stopped. It was like, don't think you know everything. And I like, it was just one of those, like, I'm going to show you. But I just, yeah. Sometimes you never know what you're going to get.
So
I think the only
yeah.
time I've measured my
Don't
dose
fall
was for
asleep.
micro doses.
yeah,
That's what I've actually measured. And I think like I've decided to eat more sometimes or less other times, but it's always, and I'm talking about specifically psilocybin, that's what I have the most experience with. But it's for me, it's always been kind of intuitive, like where I'm at that day. I may go into wherever, like with my friends and say, yeah, let's all like do all of them. But I get there and I'm like, I'm just going to do this many. It's so intuitive for me. And so I don't know. I've never measured, I don't think, except for like, the tiny, which I did make a mistake. I read the point in the wrong place, and it was not exactly a microdose. So yeah, a little small.
Mistakes can happen.
Wasn't a big deal, but yes, it happened.
Oh, we want to talk about Carl Hart. I just wanted to, can I talk just quickly about dose too? Especially with like microdosing and stuff, like, because I've microdosed different doses. And I mean, I've done drug checking for the better part of the last decade, and harm reduction surrounding drug checking. And of course, like just all of those pieces. So, I mean, dose is something that for a lot of different drugs I've had to talk about, but I find with microdosing, there's so much information that's kind of coming out in different protocols that are out, and like a lot more just kind of options if you've never microdosed before, like on how to get started, because you're not necessarily going to feel psychedelic effects with microdosing. I mean, especially with psilocybin. And I mean, I've tried it. For me, it's like once I get up to like 0.4, like 400 milligrams, let's say, I might start feeling like a little happy. And I think that's what the studies say too. Like once you get into like a half a gram or 500 milligrams, like 400 milligrams, it's kind of that creative dose, they like to call it, because it's you're not super like unable to like walk or move or stand, or like you can still do things, but it tends to make you more playful. But I've dosed out all my stuff. Like when I make my own microdoses, I weigh out my mushrooms and then I put it in caps, and then follow protocol sometimes, but other times I've done it purely intuitively as well. With larger doses, I tend to want them weighed. I don't like to do larger doses alone much these days. Like I'd prefer to have someone near. So I haven't done any for quite a while. COVID makes that a little difficult. But I think that I prefer to measure, like, and I'll measure, like, I'll be like, oh, I'll do, or like chocolates or whatever. Like I know exactly how much is in everything I'm taking. Always with MDMA, same thing. And I'll have like, say like a threshold dose of, if say MDMA, like a threshold dose of like 75 milligrams. I might take that to start, or 100, like just go over. I won't go straight to 150 or 175 or 200 like a lot of people do, or like press pills where you don't really know how much dose is even in them because there's a lot of filler. So you can't actually determine what the dose is a lot of the time. And I mean, unless the person selling you tells you, but I mean, do they really know? Sometimes not. Sometimes maybe a guess, stuff like that. Like there's lots of variables. So if you're able to like actually use a scale and dose out, because I mean, yeah, it just, for me, it makes a big difference in how I even perceive my safety. And or it's like when I look at substance use, especially in prohibition, because we don't have regulated, weighed out sources we can just buy from, it's like, how can I take ownership of my safety in any way possible right now? Like, what does that look like? So for me, that's, I definitely, I always use a scale. Not with LSD because it's blotter, but I try to make sure I know the dose and or start low, same thing. And I agree with Mart. I don't ever really heroic. It doesn't matter. All doses, you can learn something from every dose. One random thing, even dietas, if we think about plants that in other cultures that are like revered as master teacher plants and used in dietas, a lot of them aren't psychedelic or psychotropic at all, but you were like building a relationship with that plant as a teacher, and that plant teaches you things. And they, like, I mean, I don't know, I'm not saying I know a ton about dietas because I don't, but I have actually heard recently that some healers in North America are starting to use plants from here and start people on dietas with plants, sacred plants, like of the Northern Hemisphere.
Interesting.
Yeah. Just tidbit.
Like for me personally, like one of the gifts of COVID has been foraging. So like kind of connecting with like what's around here specifically has been a really cool exercise. I'm happy to kind of hear, that dieta process kind of transition into somewhere that's closer. Because that is one of the barriers for experiences. Like a lot of that knowledge is often on like another continent, or it has to travel here. So then there's a high financial cost to access. But I mean, I don't want to be the Debbie Downer that shuts down the conversation, but we are kind of wrapping around close to 9 o'clock. So if you wanted to slowly kind of bring this to a close, I think it'd be neat to kind of get everyone to share one last thing. Like, is there one last thing that anyone wants like expand on? Any final thoughts or any of that? For me, this conversation has been a lot of fun. It's always been cool with the different check-ins or the board meetings. There's always a big check-in, and that's my favorite part, and then the conversation afterwards. So it's been a real treat kind of having this completely unstructured conversation with you guys. So like one of the benefits of psychedelics is building community, and here we are without psychedelics, around psychedelics, but still building community. So I think that's pretty cool. I'm just really excited to see what we can do, where the movement kind of grows, and just happy to be a part of this. Thank you for letting me be in the group. And I forget the name of the organizer, but Joe, I wish you all the success with this event, and I hope we've provided you with some half decent content.
I'm just really excited. I'll go next. I'm really excited for the telethon, and I hope everyone feels generous, and I hope the content was interesting for some. And if you're curious, if you want to try, there is so much information on the internet. I'm going to do a shameless social media plug, but only because we have gathered a lot of it in one place. So our Instagram account is, what is it?
Okay, psychedelics.
Thank you.
Psychedelics, I think.
And we have a link in bio. We have links to so many different pages that lists by substance, or shows how to, or reads how to dose, or has videos on how to dose, or how to try these things. So much information. It's out there if you're curious. Really happy to be working outside of this structure in a grassroots organization with these folks here that are really amazing, and whose perspectives and stories like all weave together into this really cool tapestry. And yeah, just do your homework, know who you're sitting with, learn about your substance of choice.
And I like a couple of you said, let it choose you.
Yeah.
Let the substance choose you. Let the substance find you, because it will. Plants are incredibly intelligent, in which we don't give them very much credit for. And they've always been the ones who help us heal, the ones who help us on our journeys here as humans. I can say just sharing in this open kind of conversation, I've been thinking about, all the people who are suffering. I think about addiction. I think about households that get broken because of, lack of empathy or lack of ability to communicate in a way that the heart is open. And so when I think about these substances, I just see so much power for healing in families, and of course in friendships, and in all sorts of relationships. Power dynamics, creating power with dynamics, not only power with the other humans in our lives, but power with animals as opposed to power over, power with the plants as opposed to just taking from the earth in a way that's not very sacred or thoughtful. And I guess, yeah, I'm grateful for this opportunity to speak. I'm grateful for everybody who's part of the Okanagan Psychedelic Society. And yeah, many blessings, and may everyone be safe. May everyone listen and have open hearts to heal. Thank you.
Oh, man. I don't even know what to say. I feel like, first off, I'm never doing an introduction again. I feel like
You crushed it though.
Yeah, you do.
So good.
I feel like we learn so much about who someone is just through dialogue like this with other people. Like, I don't know. I really, really enjoyed talking with you guys as usual. And I really feel like I resonate so much with what you said, Rebekah, too. And Emma, I know I resonate with all of you guys because you're the best teachers and friends ever. Like, really, I am so lucky. And through all of the crazy shit, all of the healing, just from, from a nurse and a healthcare provider perspective, our healthcare system needs a complete and total paradigm shift. And we need to shift how we see health and how we treat people and how we create health in our communities and individually in our systems. We need to it needs to shift, and we need to start seeing the sacredness in ourselves in order to do that. And I think, and just that connection needs to be there. And as a healthcare provider also who is healing, like everyone else, we're all kind of in our own recovery stories. I don't know. I think there's just the benefits that I've experienced personally. I just want other people to be able to experience them if they need it. And I don't want to say, because I don't think psychedelics are for everyone, but they are for someone, like some people, they're for some people, and if they're going to help some people, then those people need to have access. But yeah, my last thoughts is that all of these substances have the potential to help and heal. They also have the potential to do the opposite, depending on how we choose to kind of set it up. And also, yeah, they're not going to be for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if that's kind of a solemn, weird thing to end on, but
It's good.
it's true.
It's honest.
Like, don't feel like, I don't think anyone should ever feel pressured to do something like that if they don't think it's for them at
And
all.
it's not the miracle cure for every single person. And so the
Hell no.
distance factor can be.
You're like plucking my brain. I have this saying on my wall and I stare at it all the time. And it's, I have more choices available to me than I think I do. One of them is always no.
Yeah.
You know,
Oof.
and it's like that's for myself, but that's also like a boundary. That's the energy I hold that I can say to other people if I'm in a situation where maybe I don't feel safe, but I feel a lot of pressure. Or, you know, how Emma, like you were talking about earlier, of like going in with this intention of taking like all the mushrooms, or, you know, and then deciding in the moment, I can change my mind. I have that ability. I have that power of choice, and I can say no to all the mushrooms, and I can maybe just do a little bit or none at all, or, you know, so I try to reflect on that a lot. So I'm glad you brought that up, Melissa. Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up, Quinn.
Well,
Just makes me think about my privilege to be able to say no. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Empowerment.
Yeah, and that is a privilege. That's right. Like sometimes people don't have the opportunity as freely as I might, or some of us might.
Mm-hmm.
I'm glad you can own that empowered piece of yourself and make that choice to do it, though. Like, that's
To consider it, to think about it, just to notice that that's something that you have on your wall is kind of cool.
Yeah.
Consider just to, yeah.
I should have that on my wall. It's great.
Boundary work is so important. It's so important. You know, I guess maybe I'll leave with that. You know, there was a saying that I can't remember where it's from, but it's you teach others how you want to be treated. You show the world how you want to be treated by your actions, by your thoughts, by the way that you show up in the world. And I think by making choices, like when talking about drug use, making choices of using drugs, but also about how you're using drugs, is showing others how you want to use drugs, but also how you can use drugs and how others can use drugs. Responsibly, not at all, a lot. And I think it also opens up a door to say that I'd like to think that I'm a safe person, that you can talk to me about drug use. And I think that if more people do that, then we're going to have a lot more open doors and a lot more conversation and a lot more, you know, we won't a normalization of drug use, and that I think that's a goal. It's I don't know, it kind of is for me, at least. Yeah.
It reminds me a lot. I think it's Gandhi. It's like his whole thing was like, my life is my message.
Oh, that's a good one too. We should put that on a wall.
It's on many walls. It's
Like-
on some bumper stickers.
Write that down right now. Hold on.
Write that down. Yeah.
All right, should we stop the recording?
Sure. Bye,
Yeah.
Joe. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks,
you very much.
Joe.
Thank you so much, Joe.
I'm kind of nervous to stop this now.